Live or listening back to this show from Teachers Talk Radio. You can catch up with all our shows by visiting our YouTube channel or by listening back at ttradio.org. Don't forget to like and subscribe to enjoy more live education conversation from TTR. We hope you enjoy this show.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
And welcome to Teachers Talk Radio, the Twilight Show tonight. And working with British Red Cross, we've got a show on conflict, climate change, migration and emergencies, and making sense of that in the classroom. We're going to be talking about the Humanitarian Education Programme, and we're joined by some fantastic guests tonight. We're joined by William Spencer, Grant Hoyle and Rebecca Taylor, all to talk about different aspects of things that teachers can be doing with some of these wonderful resources that have been prepared. Now, I want to get off to a start just with a brief introduction from each of our guests. We'll go around the circle. And William, you, I'm told, have a passion or a special interest in first aid in particular as well. But if you tell a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, wouldn't it be good if everyone knew what to do in a first aid emergency? So my job is looking after our first aid products and our climate education products. So they're two big portfolios. And it's so I work in a team called Community Education. We deliver free education to up to 3 million people every year, trying to drive resilience in communities and personal resilience as well.
And Rebecca, yourself, from your resume that I briefly, some really challenging topics it looks like that you're working with, conflict, migration, some really interesting things though. How does, what is part of your role then?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. There's some really big topics in there and ones that we think are really important for young people to learn about. So we want to provide the best sort of CPD and teaching resources we can to help tackle the need in these areas. So it's my responsibility to make sure that we're doing the right things at the right time, and providing the expertise we can from the British Red Cross to really embed the sort of values-based education in those big topics that you mentioned, migration, global conflicts, and also exploring well-being and personal resilience space as well.
Fantastic. And we're joined by Grant Hoyle as well, an ex-teacher. Grant, you're bringing some classroom expertise to the table here.
Yeah, well, lots of expertise around the table. Yeah, but 10 years of experience. What I really love about the job I have at the moment as the educational content manager is bringing that experience into our products and that kind of knowledge of what it's like, out there in classrooms teaching day in, day out, into how we design and build things so that they really work for the teachers as a group of people that we work with. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like we've got a fantastic little panel together here to talk about some really tough topics. But I wanted, before we get into that, to talk a little bit about the British Red Cross itself, because preparing, for this show and looking through the resources, I felt a little bit embarrassed myself because, of course, I felt I'd always been aware of the British Red Cross, but I honestly couldn't quite put a finger on what it was. Or why, I guess it was. So I'm wondering if we can pin some of that down. Why are the British Red Cross?
Yeah, it's a really good question, actually, Nathan. And I think we've always been involved, right back to our starting kind of with Henry Dunant, like over 100 years ago, in 3 cause areas. And that's been disasters and emergencies. So if something goes wrong, if there's a fire, a flood or a natural disaster, we're there to support people. Around health, so people may know us for our first aid work, but also around health inequalities in the UK, but also in other countries. So things like, if you can't make it home from hospital, we can help you to do that so that you can come home safely. And in other countries, we run the ambulance service, so a real variety of things that we do there. And the last one is around refugees and migration. So if there are people that, are fleeing war zones and things like that and coming to other countries, it's supporting them and helping them to stay in contact with loved ones and families. And we do that work both at home, so both in the UK, we do activity around all those three areas, like William's mentioned, our free first aid resources, for instance. But also we do that work internationally, and it's about a 50-50 split between those two areas. So that's the areas we work in, and we try and be the world's emergency responder. And the way that we work is to try and help people to help each other, and to work with us to help people. So, we try and harness that power of humanity so that we can bring people together so they can support each other and help each other with those emergencies.
And I think for me, you talk about that history there, but the British Red Cross has been around for a long, long time. And I was kind of looking through sadly, I guess, the conflicts and the challenges then, and the experience that the British Red Cross would have. There's a lot there that has happened in its experience that people can dip into. It's been around a long time and a lot of conflicts.
Yeah, I mean, we were active in the Second World War. There were voluntary aid nurses that the British Red Cross coordinated, and as well in the First World War, so well over 100 years. And we've had all kinds of experiences around that. And I guess what we're finding now is that we're slightly moving into new areas. So there are new causes of climate disasters and emergencies, and we're looking to spread where we can help, where we've got expertise more widely. And that's really what the Humanitarian Education project is all about. So people can get involved with that, and we can share our expertise and things like that in the more modern areas where we're involved.
And I guess that kind of brings us also into the why as well, and the why of the British Red Cross, because we're talking about the Humanitarian Education Programme tonight and that humanitarian response to things. But honestly, I once reading through this, it was something clicked in my head, and I thought this is a way that I hadn't looked at the world, maybe, or an approach that I hadn't thought about before. So what is the why for the British Red Cross?
Yeah, I mean, it's always centered on people in crisis. And the key point is that it's humanitarian. So it doesn't matter who that person is. If there's a high level of need somewhere, that's where the Red Cross want to go and respond. That's who we want to be within supporting. But also that humanitarian runs through how we do it. So, it's valuing that person as a person and working with other people to kind of help and support people, kind of bringing people together in that way.
And and I'll throw this open to the group as well. I'm conscious we've got so much experience around the table, but do you think that helps with why people see the British Red Cross as a trusted organisation, and why teachers looking at this might feel safe taking advice and support from the British Red Cross?
Yeah, absolutely. I think with some really strong fundamental principles as an organisation, and those will mirror across to those that educators uphold as well. So our principles of humanity, as Grant mentioned, but also our neutrality and impartiality is something that can really build trust, and people know what they're going to get from an organisation like ourselves is going to uphold those values, and be really clear in our neutrality and in our impartiality, kind of putting humans at the centre of what we do.
There's such a lot of misinformation around at the moment as well. So for teachers, you want to know that these resources, the research, the way stuff has been built has been done absolutely properly. It's neutral, it's from a good place, the facts are absolutely nailed on, and these resources are classroom safe. So in a world of so much misinformation, our resources hopefully stand out and are ready off the shelf to be used.
And there's maybe one other thing that might lead to people trusting us, which is the nature of how we're organised. So we're volunteer-led. Our board of directors is our frontline volunteers who are out there volunteering to give up their work and do it, and they make sure that we kind of stick to our purpose. So it's another thing that makes us trusted, I think.
And I think that's a really valuable thing for teachers. I know certainly the teachers listening will be, myself, I've been in that situation where particularly, some of the topics that Rebecca specialises in, if I was to Google, stick into a search engine, some of these things, I would have that worry about what is the information I'm getting back? Is it reliable? Is it unbiased? Is it trustworthy? And all of those things. So coming from a teacher's point of view, I certainly feel that gives me a sense of comfort. I guess it does bring me on to maybe a question, we've talked about there's this long history of what's happened, and certainly people might have images of the British Red Cross from the Second World War, seeing documentaries or films, but it's still a very current issue, and some of these topics are still very, very current things that we see in the news at the moment. Why do you guys think it's important to support then these future generations of humanitarians?
Yeah, we look to the past, we build upon everything that's happened in the past, but we've firmly got our eyes on the future. So crises occur day in, day out in the UK, around the world, and some of those are old crises. There could be a fire down the road, you have heat waves, you have floods, and some are new. And if you look at the classroom today, some of those real issues are, you'd probably say, are new crises in the classroom. But we are there where there are crises. We're there to help when people do struggle. But crucially, I suppose the bit people don't really know us for is we're there to try and avert those crises in the first place as well, which is why the education comes in. We want to build strong young people, the next generation of humanitarians. We want a kinder, safer world, and that's hopefully what this programme of education will deliver.
I think, certainly I really like, and I will hopefully get onto a little bit later, those ideas of maybe the resilience, the preparedness, all of those things, and that humanitarian approach. I wanted to ask about, do we feel that maybe young people are different in this generation, different in what they have to face, or different in what they have to, the skills that they have? When we talk about maybe my generation, now I'm an old generation, and the generations before that, the things that we would be able to do in a crisis. And now I look at my young children, and I think actually you would know how to use a tablet, you would know how to use a computer. Would you be able to help in this situation? Would you be able to help yourself? All of those skills. Has the world changed for young people? Are we in a changing world?
Yeah, it's massively different, but the core principles are the same. Being able to reach out, ask for help, ask for support, give support remain the same. But certainly the clothes the crisis wear are absolutely different. Every generation thinks they're different, and they probably are, to be honest. And likewise, as I said, the crises we're seeing in classrooms today are born about by today's issues, so that they require today's solutions. And yes,
your team did some really interesting work around that, didn't they? And some research around young people and what the challenges are that they're facing.
Yeah, we were really fortunate to work with a group of young people, asking them all about the challenges that they face today. And that's all being built into our Teaching About Resilience course. And it is a changing world, as William said, and as you said, Nathan, but we need to meet the young people where they are, and in those settings and in the contexts that they're in. We've touched on kind of how much information they're exposed to now is tenfold what it may have been in the past. We need to help them to explore that critically and to think about the information that they're receiving in a humanitarian way, and be able to approach that to build their own resilience and the resilience of their communities that they're within as well.
Yeah, and I guess it comes back to some of those core principles around, the principles haven't changed. The way we might meet them. I still want the young people I work with, and I still want my own children to be able to lead people, to care for people, to support them, and face challenges calmly. All of those things I want. It might be different to how my granddad did it in some ways, or how I did it, but certainly I still want those same values and core things to happen. It kind of raises a point for me of where this idea of getting to young people and supporting them really came from. Because there's, before we get onto the details of what's included, because there's so much I want to talk about there as well, but the idea of reaching into schools and starting with young people, how did the humanitarian education program come to be?
Yeah, we know that reaching young people and helping them to understand and respond to these challenging topics is so vital and so important, as we've spoken through. And we know as the British Red Cross that we can reach so many more young people by working alongside their educators to ensure that there is this really strong values-based humanitarian education really embedded through the curriculum and throughout a young person's experience, right from school right through to youth groups or more informal settings as well as that as well. So, but we know that these are really challenging, big topics to discuss and to open up these conversations about. So we wanted to provide CPD and resources to make it as easy as possible to do that in a safe and a meaningful way. We know that teachers, of course, are so busy though. So it was balancing that, as I say, making it as easy as possible to access under one really coherent programme of education, hence the creation of a programme of humanitarian education that combines CPD and teaching resources, all for free, all in kind of multiple formats. We spoke with educators about the ways that they'd like to access this learning and access the resources. And ultimately, it's a mixture. It's being flexible. It's being able to pick and mix the bits that are relevant and appropriate to the context that you're working in a whole range of different ways, whether that's online independently or shared space with our kind of expert facilitators in facilitated sessions, and being able to take the programme how you want it, basically. And ultimately, we're looking to build up that confidence, build up the knowledge and the skills required to teach these topics, and take away the fear there might be, the fear of getting it wrong for some of these topics, whether that's the more practical side of things in first aid, or saying the wrong thing when talking about global conflicts or migration and some of those challenging topics. So we want to take that fear away. We want to make it as easy as possible to access all these free materials, whether it's CPD or resources, and make it super easy to work with the young people and be able to hold this discussion.
And I think teachers will really appreciate that. I know, looking at it myself and pulling these different strands together was something I was really impressed with. As I say, a light bulb moment for me when I saw them all together. But you've hit so many, my light bulbs were going off as you spoke then about the things that worry me as a teacher and, as a school leader, that we're looking at and going, we would like to get some of these things on the program, but you're right. As a teacher, I would have the fear of, where am I going to get this information? Or I don't know enough about it. So I would love to do this, but I'm scared, and teachers are time poor, and, all of those things. So we might never get to it. But now, hopefully, I think there's a really powerful resource here that would take away so many worries that I had or have as a teacher that enable me to do that. We've come up with this idea. This is a way of supporting teachers to deliver something that's so valuable, which is great. But there must have been a point when putting it together, and we'll talk maybe within this about what's included in the program. I've said there are these topics, but there must also have been things that had to be left out, or you've gone through a process there. So how did it come to be that the subject areas within the humanitarian education program came to be those topics?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, Nathan. It relates to kind of some of the things we were exploring together earlier about the history of the organisation and where it's come from, but also some of the things that William and Rebecca have just touched on about how there are new challenges and things different for young people now than they were in the past. So there's a couple of new things that we've put in that the Red Cross hasn't historically been so involved in. So one of the modules is around climate change, and it's really, as William was stressing earlier, it's about actually if there's a disaster or something's going on, or maybe you're feeling anxious about climate change, because we hear that a lot of young people are, then how can you respond to that? What tools can we give you that will help you with that? And a second new topic is around personal resilience, which is very much a buzzword at the moment, but it's not personal resilience as in just buck up and cope with all these things that are happening to you, but it's acknowledging what's going on for young people, and actually they've got a lot more challenges in their lives with the change of kind of media and more digital connectedness, And again, giving them some tools and techniques and being able to work with them in a way that helps them to feel safe and able to talk about and share some of those things. And then the second way we had to choose things was things where we had expertise. So obviously we have developed expertise in climate change and in resilience, but we've always had expertise coming right back to those three cause areas in health and first aid. So that's absolutely one of our modules that we chose to do, because we really wanted to share that knowledge and expertise that teachers will benefit from and will value. Because I know, as a teacher, one thing you really want to do is know what you're talking about when you stand up in front of the young people. It's from the first thing you're concerned about. But also in conflict and international humanitarian law, where we have an obligation actually to share things about that, so that we can probably think of conflicts going on in the world at the moment where things haven't perhaps been as they should have been, and it's really important that we get that message out there and we develop that with our young people, that they understand them. And the last area where we can share expertise is our work around migration and refugees, and people who've come here from other countries fleeing persecution or problems there. And what's really unique about some of that work is we can bring the voices of those people into what we're doing. So it's not us speaking on behalf of people, but it's us sharing their experiences and their voices. And I think Rebecca's got a lovely story, maybe when we get to the migration one, that she'll want to share with us later about how some of that work's gone. So that's really why we've picked those areas. They're things where we can see a developing need out there that we need to meet for young people and with young people. And we've got some expertise that we can share with you. And perhaps the last thing to say is that the expertise isn't just the subject matter knowledge. It's also that we thought about, how might you approach this as a teacher? What might your educational approach be, given these topics? What might be a good way into it? What might be a good way of teaching that? So that's the last thing that we really hope we can leave with the teachers that engage with the programme and help them to benefit their young people.
I think, and this is a credit to the program that's been put together here, is that I read it, and I myself am a geography teacher at heart, but I did other things, and actually, I've taught other humanity subjects. I kind of now want to start describing myself as a humanitarian subject specialist, and looking at it now, I kind of have in my head that I can't believe this subject didn't exist before as a subject itself. In that idea of, we do a humanitarian unit of work, or we do those things in the same way we do history, or the same way we do RS. And so it feels very much that it is there, and that schools can really grab hold of this with skills in place, maybe teachers moving slightly from where their comfort zone or their subject specialism is, but not moving far, because this is kind of just a different way of looking at it. I wanted to ask as well, we've talked about it, and I'm really keen to get onto the first aid part as well, because it's something I've been harping on about for years myself. But we've talked a little bit there about talking about teachers feeling like they can stand in front of a class. And we've talked a little bit about the support that's available already, Rebecca, I know. But I'm looking at a list here of all of those things that are available. And so, I wanted to talk, if I am going to be a humanitarian teacher, is my new role that I've created at my school, just because I want to, because I really do think this is good. What are those support tools for us? Rebecca, possibly William as well, and Grant as well, to add to it. But what is my steps almost as a teacher that I can look at those tools to help me feel confident?
Yeah, so we have a really simple way into our programme. It's all available at brceducatorhub.org.uk, and everything can be accessed within there. As you say, we've touched on some of the ways that you can approach this programme already, and all of the topics covered that Grant's mentioned there in that previous question are all available in that mix of formats that I spoke through. So you can access it online as simple e-learning modules, really nice kind of short learning bites to dip in and out of as and when time is available. Or if you'd prefer to learn kind of alongside peers and alongside others and be able to learn from that sort of community of practice style approach, this learning is all available as online masterclasses too, you can register for, or in fact, book a live session from one of our experts directly to come to your organisation to work with you and your colleagues on these topic areas and really be able to develop those skills and knowledge. And I think that the important thing to note is that the knowledge is so important on these topics to help with that confidence and feel equipped to be able to stand up. But a lot of the skills we're teaching are very centred around the humanitarian education approach and are actually transferable right across all topics. So things like how to handle challenging conversations sits within our global conflicts module, but actually can be applied right across the board. We know that challenging conversations come up all the time in schools with young people, kind of picking on what they've heard in the news or on social media, and want to be able to dig into that. So we're offering really clear strategies and tools to be able to handle those conversations and approach them in a really safe and neutral way that doesn't shut it down, that still opens it up and still makes sure that there's a safe environment for the young people to really dig into those topics and explore them with you as a kind of trusted adult. And it's the same with kind of the skill around taking a trauma-informed approach, sits within our migration module. Again, although we're focusing on migration, these skills are applicable right across a whole range of topics. So we hope they'll be useful right across the experiences with young people.
It sounds really powerful, and the more you talk about it for me, the more I'm thinking, actually, do you know what, this is something that I can do and in itself deliver, but actually there's parts here, as you rightly described, that are going to impact and make me a more powerful teacher, a more useful teacher, a more able teacher in general as well. But it's really useful. I'm just making notes so that in my next link meeting with senior leadership team, I can just say, no, it's fine. I'll be doing this and I'll be doing this, and it's supported through this, because it does sound very well put together to support teachers. You're right, we are time poor, but it sounds like a lot of that work's been done for me, that I can go to my senior leadership team and say, look, there is something here that we can try, and it is well supported and it is well trained, and it can come in my CPD time. And it will make me a better practitioner in general as well, which I guess is a massive fringe benefit from the programme.
I think it's worth saying, sorry, that we've talked to so many teachers to help build this programme as well. So the subjects we chose came about from talking to teachers. We've got a long history of delivering these subjects in classes, providing teaching resources on these subjects anyway. The twist, the added kind of, the secret sauce here is now we're really training the teachers to deliver them themselves. Often we've gone into schools in areas that really need specialist education, delivered a workshop, and the teachers at the back of the room said, you know what, I could deliver that. And that's what this programme is about. It's not saying it's a massive MA, you have to finish. You can just go in with one specific subject like first aid or choose just one. You can just choose one component of that and just learn that, and then that's your toe in the water, and then you can branch out into the fuller programme. But it's all come about from talking to teachers, both the subjects we've chosen, how we've dealt with it, and how we teach it.
I think that's a really important point, William, about that scale of engagement that you can have. So it might be you just think, I just want to learn how to talk about conflict, and you could come along and you could do one section of one module, and you could think, right, I've got that little tool in my toolbox now as a teacher. I can go and use that the next time something contentious comes up in the classroom. Or it could be you do the whole module, or it could be you're a head of department and you want someone to come in and run a twilight, and you want us to come and run a workshop with you in your school. Or maybe you just on your own and you want to pop into a masterclass. But at the other end of it, we've had whole schools take up the offer. And we've gone and we've done training for a whole group of teachers in that school, and then 2,000.
We seem to have lost Grant.
Yeah, I'm afraid, Grant, we've cut you off mid-sentence there.
Yeah, I was going to say, so there really is a range of ways that people can engage.
I really like that. I think if I was a senior leader listening now, and I was thinking there are options here that can really support what my school development goals are, and that I can be bespoke in a way, and it's flexible enough where it needs to be, but also very supportive at the same time. I wanted to delve into some of those topics a little bit more detailed, and we are going to start with probably one of those biggest. Actually, all of these topics are big in their own way, but maybe one of the ones that, as a teacher, I would feel some of the most fear about presenting in the right way, and that's the conflict and war element of it, Rebecca, and helping students understand global conflicts, their human impact. I imagine there'll be some history teachers maybe who are more comfortable in this or really keen to hear the approach to delivering that and where it takes the young people and their understanding. So how do we explore this element, Rebecca, and where does it take us and align with the curriculum?
Yeah, our teaching about war and conflict course is, of course, one of my favourites. But I think your fear there, Nathan, is totally valid to be able to feel a little bit nervous around approaching it. But we're providing the skills, as I say, to give a really clear 5-step strategy to handling these challenging conversations, really starting with acknowledging the feelings that young people will be having around these topics and validating those emotions, right through to learning together and really opening that discussion up with your young people. So, as you've mentioned, history teachers, definitely very aligned to the curriculum there, but also we're aligning to the citizenship curriculum too, really exploring the rules of war and why rules are so important to be able to protect the humanity within conflicts and reduce the suffering that's caused by them. So really, again, going right back to the beginning where we were talking about our principles, putting human stories at the centre of this topic is so important to help young people be able to think critically about what they're reading in the news or on social media. We know young people are exposed more than ever to information about global conflicts. So it's about giving them that framework to understand what's going on, to understand the things that are in place to protect human life within these scenarios. I'm really looking at it from that human angle. So we're looking to teach people stories and the impact on human beings. We're looking at how the rules of war are limiting the suffering. And we're also looking as well, going back to our expertise around how humanitarian assistance taking place in those scenarios. No matter what side people are on, that humanitarian aid is getting through and being able to support, and why that's so important as well. And we're really proud to have some really great resources on this topic to explore those themes in more detail with young people. We have a wonderful interactive video that is called If War Comes to You, created alongside the IFRC and the Danish Red Cross, and a whole host of international societies were involved in the project. And it really explores a kind of a simulation of a war through 3 different perspectives. So you can play the game as a civilian, as a soldier, or as a humanitarian aid worker. So it's really exploring kind of the impact that it has on different people within that scenario, but also the decisions they have to make and how those decisions might be informed and the consequences of those as well. So we have lesson plans to support the use of that resource, and we have a whole host of other materials as well to align to those curriculums and really dig in where it's needed to that topic.
I think there's something there that really hit home with me, and this is as not a history teacher, and maybe history teachers will jump, shoot me down for this, but that human angle that you talk about and these different perspectives when it comes to conflict is not something that, as a non-specialist, naturally comes to me. When I think of war, and if someone was to ask me to teach about a conflict, even a current one, I would naturally lean towards teaching at the macro level and, showing large maps with almost dehumanized aspects on it in my approach. And it sounds like this is almost the complete opposite, is it? Where we're looking at individuals.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's totally understandable that that's where you go. But I think the powerful bit about bringing in real stories and understanding the impact of people is generating that kind of empathy building aspect of this topic amongst young people. And again, something that we've heard is so important in our research with educators, and developing that empathy for other people's experiences around the world is something that's key in all of our topics.
It's a really good result. If war comes to you, it's like a video game. If you want something engaging for young people, it's brilliant, and it makes you want to replay it from different perspectives. It's a really quality bit of gear.
It does sound good. You know, I've been in those lessons where I've taught, you know, our citizenship lessons, or, you know, PSHE lessons, where it's been me reading a blank bit of a page of text to them and trying to engage them. And it is so difficult sometimes for teachers. And this sounds like it is, as you say, designed there to engage and to meet the young people where they are and how they're used to consuming information, maybe more, and to really experience that. So it does sound really a powerful approach to teaching a difficult or what should be an engaging topic, maybe is how I should frame that, but maybe with fear from the teachers. I wanted to ask about, and there's a few different ones. I've been, going through, I need to talk about that. I need to talk about that. I've mentioned it already, and I know it's come up, but I really want to talk about first aid and this idea of first aid being in it. And, it brings me back. I think one of the most powerful trainings I ever did before being a teacher, I worked in outdoor ed, and I did first aid training, and the crisis management involved in that, the confidence levels of knowing that I had a little bit of first aid knowledge about me, live with me now in my day-to-day life. I think I still look at the world in some ways as a first aider, but I wanted to ask William really about this and what sort of things they get to explore and build confidence in through the learning how to act in emergencies.
We've tried to make first aid as simple as possible. So the course you probably went on was a workplace course, and that's as detailed as you need it, and it's great, and it will help you save a life. Wonderful. Do it if you can. Superb. But we specialise in everyday first aid, so it's a unique approach to the British Red Cross, and we want people to be able to step in and help in an emergency with what you have around you. And frankly, the phone is probably your best weapon always. We just want people to call for help and know what to do for any of the kind of 25 most common emergencies out there. So we want to equip young people with the skills and the knowledge to be able to confidently act in an emergency. And it's that confidence that's really key as well. We don't want people just to walk on by. The bystander effect is very real, and our education absolutely tackles that head on. We want people to have the confidence to be able to say, look, something's wrong, assess the situation and call for help and know what to do. So our resources are, we have a website called First Aid Champions, which teachers can use without any formal training. We do provide training for it as part of the Humanitarian Education Programme, which I encourage people to use, but you can just step onto the website First Aid Champions right now and use it today. So you'll be using it more as a facilitator rather than a teacher, because all of the education is baked into the resources. The teaching is nailed on. We have a team of clinicians. It's medically sound, it's pedagogically sound, and it's really engaging, as Rebecca was saying, with As War Comes to You. What we do with first aid is we gamify it, we have quizzes, we have videos, we check in before and after with confidence checkers, and we have big questions that engage kind of classroom debate on these topics. So we split that largely between primary and secondary across First Aid Champions, and obviously the degrees of the detail you go into is different depending on the age group. And even for adults, we've got the First Aid app that takes you beyond that, and we've got education on YouTube, etc. So we're really well known for first aid education at the British Red Cross, and that absolutely fits into a kind of package of resilience building, whether that's personal or community, and hence why it's a key kind of plank of the Humanitarian Education Programme. So what we've done now is we've bolted on this added layer of CPD for teachers to come on, and they can just do a simple 90-minute masterclass. Just sign up. You can sign up today if we've got a couple more before the end of the year, maybe 2 or 3. Or you can speak to a local coordinator and get booking a personal lesson. They'll come to your school if you can get a few teachers together and teach you how to use these resources. Or you can just simply do an e-learning now. You can just go online to the brceducatorhub.org and take 2 modules, just 2 modules, and by the end of it, you'll get a certificate and be able to confidently teach first aid using the British Red Cross resources.
I think as well, William, there's some excellent video support around that, isn't there? So I know some teachers might feel, oh, I need to go and do a 3-day first aid course before I can teach this. So I feel I've got the subject matter knowledge down, but you've got a video there that really takes you through it step by step for each skill. And you've also highlighted how, there's some really lovely practical active learning activities there where the young people can practice and have a go, and you can get them up and practicing, which can be a really nice change for young people who might be doing a lot of kind of cognitive work all day. To do some practical learning can be a really lovely kind of bit of variety for them in what they're doing.
Yeah. We fought for years to get first aid on the curriculum, and it's piecemeal across the 4 nations, but and we're seeing it being adopted, and we still go in and teach first aid in schools, but increasingly we want teachers to be able to deliver this themselves, not just in lessons, but in assemblies and after school clubs, wherever they can fit it in, because you can, for 5 minutes, you can teach a life-saving skill, and wouldn't it be great if every young person knew how to save a life? And that's everything from choking right through to chest compressions.
I could stand on a pedestal and talk about first aid for ages. It's something that I've always had on my wish list as a teacher, and looking at the provision that we were, mapping out as far as a curriculum goes for young people. And never had I found a way before to fit it in that was engaging, as you say, and was pitched at the right level for the young people. I love this idea of everyday first aid and then what they can do. They don't have to be overcomplicated in some of the stuff. It's those first steps that can make a difference. And this seems like, with the first aid champions and the resources you're talking about, a really easy way, a no-brainer for some schools to turn around and say, actually, within our PSHE time, within our registration time, wherever they fit some of these other discussions in, it sounds like there's a really easy way to put something into the curriculum that's so valuable, so powerful, and something that actually, just as a community, as a country, I think is something that could really help a lot of people. And the confidence then of being in any situation, I think, comes from that, knowing that you've maybe had a little bit of a chance to talk it through beforehand.
And it's the knock-on effect it's not just about the pupils in the school, it's at home, in the community, outside, and you're catching young people young, obviously, so they'll grow up and have these skills for life. It's not just confidence; it's having that the benefit of them having those skills wherever they are. And we hear stories of people using these, people using the skills they've learned in the classroom and at home. Really powerful stories. Yeah, I suppose the other thing is we when we say we simplify the first aid steps, we boil it down to just like the one key action that you need to take, for bleeding, put pressure on the wound. We really make it as simple as possible and memorable. We take away all the jargon and make it as simple. So the tools we have to hand, it's the t-shirt, the frozen peas, we really simplify it and make it seem accessible, because it is accessible. When something happens, you only have what's to hand. You don't necessarily have a first aid kit. We want people to be able to use what they have to hand.
Yeah, and I think that it's such an interesting part, a part that I would hazard a guess that there is many people on senior leadership teams or teachers listening to us now who have rolled around this idea in their head before, have talked about it, have added it to a to-do list or to a plan, have said this is something we'd like to get to, and have never quite got there before. And here it feels like there's something that actually some teachers could possibly even put in this year, into their curriculum.
They could tell their teachers now to do the course. 90 minutes later, they'd have a certificate and they could be teaching tomorrow.
Yeah, and that feels so powerful. As I say, there's so many things about the program, the topics, all of those things, but this support for teachers and the immediacy of some of the training and the resources that you talk about. There is a chance here, if you're listening, SLT, I'll speak to some of mine tomorrow. But there is something that we can put on our school development plan. We can take some training for teachers, but also we can change some young people's lives and have an impact quite quickly and in important areas, with very little drain on our resources or our time. It feels very, very good for that. Yeah, first aid. As I say, I could talk about first aid. Like, as soon as people get me started on lifeguards and things like that, and it's a whole nother thing for me about that. We should be doing more for our young people to be able to be confident. Right, sorry. Pedestal off, onto maybe a slightly different pedestal. Another, and as I said in our introduction, Rebecca, you do have some tricky topics, some ones that scare me, that you seem to gravitate towards, I guess. And one of them, even as a geography teacher, in the very current world we're in, is migration. And I, at university, and this was admittedly 25 years ago, did a lot of work on migration, and we talked about migration, but it feels like if I was to go back and look at that now, the way we were talking about migration maybe 25 years ago is not maybe how I feel confident talking in the classroom at the moment, that it would be meeting current questions from young people or their current needs of what they need to understand. And so we have a unit here on the topic of migration. And I know you talked about previously this idea of a human angle. When I was at university, I was talking about big maps of migration movements and things like that. I'd love to hear a little bit about the approach from the humanitarian education problem through the British programme, through the Red Cross, about what its take on migration is, how that works.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel I should say I'm a previous geographer too, so the love of maps is shared and is not going anywhere. But you're absolutely right that bringing the people's stories into this is the most important part of this discussion. And we're really proud to have worked alongside the Voices Network to co-produce this course on teaching about migration. The Voices Network are a collective of people with lived experience of seeking asylum and being a refugee in the UK. So being able to use their unique insights and their own personal stories and experiences within this course has been so valuable to, as you say, be able to adapt some of these conversations to what's going on around the world and in the UK today. So that's been such a valuable part of the process for us, and something that we're really proud to be able to share and be able to provide a platform for the voices of people with lived experience. Our course includes, as I've said, how to take a trauma-informed approach to the topic, and it's similar. It's about opening up the conversation in a safe and supportive way. And we're really aiming here to provide the confidence and the skills and the knowledge needed to be able to understand the UK asylum system and understand the experiences of people who have arrived in the UK, to be able to develop that empathy amongst young people, but without re-traumatizing any learners that may have in the classroom with lived experience or past trauma themselves, to make them feel really included and really welcome within these conversations. We've had, and Grant sort of hinted at a lovely story that we wanted to share today, that we've heard recently from one of the colleges that's taken up some of our resources on this topic, and they've been exploring our People's Experience of Migration teaching resource, which again, really easy kind of pick up and teach resource. It's a PowerPoint with an accompanying educator guide, and the educator who had picked up that resource had shared with us that one of the learners in the classroom had attended the session, and actually afterwards had been able to share with her peers that she was a refugee from Syria. And the resource explores a story of one of the voiced ambassadors we worked with, who was also a refugee from Syria. And that individual in the classroom shared with her educator afterwards, she thought the session was brilliant, and it really illustrated her journey in a way that she then felt comfortable and open up to her peers in the classroom who were previously unaware of her own personal story. And that made her feel comfortable to then share that and engage. And that college is going on to think a bit more deeply about how they can host their culture day in their college and how they can bring some of those experiences in within that. So we're seeing really positive impact from this teaching resource and from the course more broadly. So really, really positive, not only for that individual student, but those that were in the classroom with her, and also those that we co-produced this resource with. It's been a really healing experience for them as well to hear those stories and that impact that they've had on the young people that we're working with.
I think hearing that, it really, sets home as well that, this is, well researched, well prepared, well thought through, and as a teacher delivering it, I would be well supported in delivering something. And your story probably perfectly illustrates that, I don't need to worry about stepping on toes. I don't need to worry about saying the wrong thing, because the way this is put together and supporting me is coming from a place of understanding and empathy and really seeing people and them feeling seen as well through the resources. So I think that's an absolute credit to get feedback like that. I bet, you guys were really touched when you heard it.
Absolutely, yeah.
I wanted again to ask, and as I say, we skate through these topics, but there are so many that I wanted to touch on just that are really interesting, because this one, I guess, is another hot topic, maybe is another topic that people will maybe have a few worries about where to get their information from on, and that's climate adaptation. And to you, William, specifically, I guess, is, when we talk about this, again, this has made me think about so many things. I always thought about this at a macro level. When are we talking about communities here? Are we talking about the changes that could affect them? Is it again part of this overarching approach to build empathy and understanding, and what can be done to support?
Yes, for too long, climate change has been the preserve of kind of science or geography. And what we found out through talking to teachers, going to flood affected areas, talking to people who've been affected through their mental health with climate anxiety, we've created this new programme of education around climate change, which is truly holistic and touches upon every part of the young person. So it really does looks at the societal impact, it looks at the effect on the body, the mind, and of course there is the science too. So, for example, there's a case study where a school was affected by a flood. Not only do we look at, of course they had the warnings, how it impacted that particular town, but the lasting legacy, the pupils that won't go back to that school, they've been dispersed, there's climate migration as well. And we look at it in I hope, a very different way to a lot of the materials out there, in that, of course, we're kind, we approach it from the human story behind these emergencies, but also we give hope. We show what can be done, not just to kind of shore up defences, but the small actions that you can take to increase your confidence, to give you some kind of sense that there is a positive future. Because too often, the talk about climate change is the world's about to pop. The truth is there are small actions you can take that will help you, that will help your family, those in need around you and the communities you live in. So we launched a couple of years ago a huge teaching resource called Weather Together. and that touches upon flooding, so knowing your risks, how to prepare for a flood, what to do after a flood, and who to help, how to help, and those small actions. We also touch upon heat waves, how to recognise the difference between everything from kind of being dehydrated right through to heat exhaustion and heat stroke. And again, there's a crossover obviously with first aid at that point. And then, of course, there's the mental health implications as well, this overarching sense of doom and gloom in the face of a changing world. So we teach people how to recognise climate anxiety, but I suppose how to deal with it as well. And what we found is it's the small actions. So all of our education is kind of really baked in a kind of nice conversational style with games and activities, but always leading people to, at the end, take some kind of positive action for themselves or the community. So it's called Weather Together. It's largely pitched at secondary, but does work for kind of older primary. And we have other resources for primary schools as well. And again, the new thing that we've baked on top now is this CPD package, just to teach people how to teach it. And it's not just the young people that suffer from climate anxiety. The teachers themselves in that flood hit town, they're acting as caretakers and therapists for a whole town in a sense. So they too need help navigating some of these issues, and we hope these resources will in part help them. So again, it's all been born of real world situations. We have a strong history of responding to crises. More and more the crises that we respond to are brought about through climate change. And so we're using those examples from kind of the immediate response to a crisis to weave into an education to try and avert some of these crises in the future.
I think it's such, and so many times I know I've said throughout this show that, I need to go back and tear up some of my planning. I wish I'd found some of this first, because, without some of this training, some of this CPD that the British Red Cross has managed to pull together into the program that is the humanitarian education program, I think I could have said I'd done some of these things. I could have said that I'd done climate change, but I don't think I would have done it justice in the way that we've just heard it described, by just going alone and, trying to find something about climate change that I could deliver to a class, because the way that it's put together, and I really feel as well the change that some of these conversations could bring about in young people, changes to mindset, changes to empathy, changes to all of those things, is such a strong part of the program as a whole. And as you say, weaved through each part very cleverly and very subtly at times, but also there and very well put together. I'm conscious that there will be people like myself listening, and I know we had a little bit earlier about where people could reach out to, where people could get some of this information. So it would be remiss of us not to flag up, where to go next. Obviously for myself, it will be taking some of this stuff to my SLT tomorrow, knocking on the door and saying, look, can we, there is something here that we need to listen to. But where are the teachers, the listeners to go to find out more if we have piqued their interest?
Yeah, so you need to head straight to brceducatorhub.org. You can sign up for a free account and access all of what we've spoken about completely for free. So sign up, enroll on the courses that sound most interesting and relevant to you, and dip in as you'd like, whether that's online, take the e-learning modules, booking onto a masterclass, or contacting us to get a facilitated live session for your organisation.
And if you like it, please tell other teachers. We're a charity, marketing is expensive. If you find something you like, please pass it on, because it helps us a lot.
And just to come back, Nathan, to the things you were saying about the type of teachers it might appeal to, any humanities teacher, there'll be something in there for you. If you're a PSHE teacher, that first aid stuff will like, but also school leaders, if you're doing stuff around spiritual, moral, social and cultural things, that could be part of it. And pastoral teams as well. If you've got migrants coming into your school and you want a nice welcoming reception for them and to avoid any problems around that, could be really helpful. Yeah. But yeah, we'd love it if you joined us in making the next generation of humanitarian educators.
I have to say, from the moment I started reading the information, I was sold. I hope that's come across, because it really has been a pleasure talking about, and it's been a privilege to find something that I wasn't aware of before, and now hopefully other people are more aware of. I certainly myself will be telling as many people as will listen to me about this and the ways it can be used, because I think there is just something here that's seeing the world from this humanitarian perspective, and the skills that it brings together and the topics that it brings together is so powerful. So thank you for putting it together. Thank you for joining us tonight to discuss it. And I apologize for my, I have throughout this said how possibly bad I was as a teacher before, but I promise I will be taking some of these things on board, and I feel that it will prepare me to help young people be prepared for the future as well. We will hopefully see many people at the BRC Educator Hub logging on, sharing. If you do, and you're one of our Teachers Talk Radio listeners, feel free to tweet us or to follow us on Instagram, on TikTok, wherever it is that you share your thoughts. Share it with us, because I personally would love to hear, and I'm sure many other teachers would love to hear, some of the things that you do with this going forward. And don't forget to tag us in at TT Radio. Thank you guys for sharing this evening.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you so much for having us.
An absolute pleasure. And I will say good night from us here at Teachers Talk Radio, and we'll see you soon.
Outstanding and world-class vision, world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused